Hello and welcome to the Skydog podcast, Horse Love, where I'm going to be talking with a whole variety of people about their love of horses. Come join us.
Take me where your river flows. I want to drive on your open road like the wilderness where we are born singing, whoa.
I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself to our wonderful followers and tell us who you are and what you do. And then I have some questions for you, Laura Leigh.
Oh, no. My name is Laura Leigh, and I'm the president and founder of Education.
And Wild Horse Education is an incredible group. If you're not following Laura's page on social media, but more importantly, the website, where there is just an absolute incredible wealth of information about wild horses that you have gathered firsthand over the years that you've been doing this. And I wanted to talk about your organization a little more, but I also just wanted, I don't think anybody or very few people know our friendship began even before I started Skydog, through my horse buddy when I was trying to find his family. And then that you actually, I invited you up to Skydog, up to Oregon, to look at kind of a couple of ranches.
There was a Skydog.
Yeah, it was. And you were probably one of the first people ever to set foot on that and talk about it as being a wild horse sanctuary. So I wanted you to talk about that, how we came to know each other, how we met at Broken Arrow, all of that, because I would love to hear the story through your voice.
There's so many memories. It was Buddy that brought us together. And it always is when you're developing a relationship that's supposed to be. I've always found that there's a horse some people might think it's funny, but a horse that's asked you to do something. And Buddy asked you to go on this journey. Yeah. And of course, one of the first steps is, who would know his family, who would know his home, who would know his herd, would be me. And through that was our first contact. We did go to Broken Arrow. And what I remember most about that trip, and I don't know if you want me to talk about it, was how hard it hit you. Yeah. We were going to go out on the range the following day and see horses. And when I went to your room to get you, you weren't ready. You were ready to leave. You were ready to take off. The being in Broken Arrow hurt you so bad that affected you so deeply that you wanted to run from the pain, so to speak. And it took a little bit of cajoling, but I did get you to go out on the range, and we found some wild horses, and you and I took a walk up into this little draw.
Yeah.
And sat with these beautiful wild horses to kind of clean away what man had done to those horses, which is what you saw at Broken Arrow and the horrible conditions there, to what the natural horse really is, and have that experience. And I actually just drove past that area. We were out in that HMA just a couple of days ago. And as we were driving by the spot that I took you in, I conveyed the story to my new passenger, how you and I walked up in there and sat with those beautiful horses.
I remember
his descendants, his family. Yeah. So that was that was a buddy moment.
It really was a buddy moment. And I remember, as well as Buddy, I had two horses from the Callahan HMA, Jimmy and Bono, and we were very close to there. Yes. We were at Battle Mountain. We were very close. And it really meant the world to me if anyone was going to have a first wild horse experience, there isn't really anyone better to take you out there than Laura Leigh, because she knows every trail, every horse, every little rutted road that you take off these main highways,
Place to avoid the rattlesnakes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. And I remember walking up that hill with you, and they were literally dots in the distance. Like I was like, how can you tell those are horses? And we walked and walked, and it just seemed like there was another hill and another hill and another hill. But to be able, as you say, to see that sight of horses still living wild and free, and that really was kind of the foundation for Skydog, that I wanted to give that back to more of them. And you've got to tell everyone, like you said something so profound to me when I was starting, because I was kind of going from one sanctuary to another, really trying to figure out, like, can I do this? Should I do this? And trying to wonder which I should make it like. And you said something so profound to me.
Yeah, but that's not the journey. The journey is to find your dream and try to see that in your head, and then get your blinders on and focus and move towards that. Wild horses have so many layers, and there are so many, it has to be, my way or the highway kind of individuals involved in this. And that's really not what this is. It's how do you find your unique spot in wild horses? Mm-hmm. And then how do you serve the horse? Not how do you serve advocacy? And so it's, you get those blinders on and you always keep the horse in focus and where you feel you can make that difference, and you move towards that. And that's the way to become an effective advocate, no matter which layer you choose to advocate in, because wild horses have so many layers, and people kind of seem to think, saving wild horses means one thing. Mm. And it doesn't. Each layer of this process is like a lane on a highway, and each one has a different destination, right? They've all got different exits, and you've got to stay in that lane and drive that lane to reach that destination. And a lot of people, are crossing lanes all the time, and the traffic jams and the accidents, and, advocacy can get really complicated. So you get those blinders on, you get your destination in mind, and you move towards it, and you make it yours.
And I definitely feel that portrait that I saw in my mind was what I hung on to in those early 2 or 3 years when I was, we were under attack from all these, I was like, I thought we were all on the same side, and there's all this kind of hatred and animosity. And I just kept that picture in my mind and kept
those blinders on, girlfriend.
Kept those words in my mind. And then I love that we then got to actually do a rescue together for a horse that meant a lot to you, even though that had its hurdles. It was such an incredible experience. And one of my fondest memories is coming to Palomino Valley to pick up Blaze. And he was the only one left that we were able to pick up from.
And we didn't even think that moment would even happen.
Yeah. Exactly. So I don't know if you can tell us the story of Blaze from your relationship with him and his family out in the wilds, and that connection that you had with him, and then following him on his journey, maybe with the hiccups or without, or however much.
Not the time we have, Claire.
That's true. That is true.
That's a 2.5 hour movie. Okay. But no, I knew him on the range, and it was a herd that, I had tried to help. They were kind of in Wild Horse Central, right in the middle of the battle for public resources, if you will. And a lot of the craziness that was happening, a lot of the intimidation and bullying that was going on between livestock and BLM at the time. But I knew him on the range, and he was always an extremely gentle band stallion. I mean, I've known literally tens of thousands of band stallions, and he was just so special. He would let you approach his band, and if you sat down, he would literally walk them over. He would let his foals get really close to you after he checked you out. And then he was very affectionate, extremely affectionate with his foals. I watched him take in, after a roundup way back when, I watched him take in a foal that had been orphaned on the range. And he was very attentive to that foal. And then there was all of that progress, in this, like you were saying, the craziness of advocacy itself, advocates kind of ran over the progress that was going on there. And then there was going to be another roundup, and that whole herd was going to be decimated. And, you see that, from my perspective, I've seen that so many times, that loss sometimes feels cumulative. And when you reached out and you were like, I was talking to you and you were like, well, is there a band? And I was like, oh yes, there's this very special stallion and his beautiful family. And then I don't know how much I go into the hiccups, but he was rounded up on a day where a foal broke its leg and was shot. And so, not being at the distance that we're at, not knowing if it was one of his or not. And then seeing them in holding, finding his mare, finding his foals, finding him with, all his sons in the stallion pen. And that was a crazy time. You had just rescued the twins.
Yeah.
And that was not, why people try to stop those kinds of moments of cleansing, why people try to stop horses from landing safe. I'll never understand. There's so much I'll never understand. And his family had shipped out. We were very, very fortunate that, occasionally you run into a BLM person who's actually listening to you.
Yeah.
And he went out and he met that stallion and he said to me, Laura, you're right. He really is something special.
Yeah.
And he pulled him aside so he didn't ship off to long-term holding.
Yeah.
And then you came down and got him. And I actually don't think I exhaled until he actually took that step on your trailer, and I kind of lost it. And then the tears of,
Yeah.
kind of hit me. And then the search began to try to find other members of his family. And that's a whole drama.
Yeah.
And how people tried to interfere with that.
Yeah.
But you did find his little mare.
Yeah. We did. And then they had their last baby together.
Little baby Belle Star.
And Laura Leigh named Belle Star after
I figured she needed an outlaw name. So she
outlaw name.
Coming from all this drama and this Wild West. The Belle Star works, right?
And it suits her so well. And again, we later added a mare that had lost her eye at the corral. It's actually an Anarchy mare who had a baby with her. And as you say, Blaze welcomed them with open hooves, or he absolutely doted on both those babies as if you wouldn't know one of them wasn't his.
No, you wouldn't.
And he's so protective. And everybody that comes to photograph horses at Skydog, they're always like, I never saw Blaze. And I'm like, and that is the way Blaze likes it. He'll come down.
Enough of the drama. Thank you, Peter.
He comes down off his mountain. He knows people leave at 4 o'clock and he leaves the hay. It might have been put out in the morning. He'll leave it there all day. After 4, he knows the cars aren't going to be going by. The pesky people aren't going to come and take his photo. And he'll bring his family down. But if you stop, if sometimes I've been coming back from somewhere, he takes them straight back up. And it's almost like a vertical trail that he's made up the mountain right behind them. And it's just, I'm like, that's, you get to have that choice. You don't want to be around us. That's absolutely fine. So,
you gave him his options. Okay.
Yes. He's like, they caught me once. I'm never letting them get me again.
I've got this beautiful little family and I really like this place.
Yes. The food's pretty good. I can get to stay pretty fat. So
I haven't been up to see him since you let him out.
And you'll have to.
Last time I was up, they were still in the pen.
And we were just having a conversation about Sinatra, and you did such a fantastic description of him, the blue-eyed horse that came from Twin Peaks, where you've also been. You described him so perfectly. You were like, who's that black horse?
He's a classic. What did I say? He's like an old muscle car. He's like the perfect Mustang.
Now I can only see him that way.
There's something about him I really like.
I love the way you called him a classic. Like, he's a classic Mustang, and he is with his. And I was like, he's got that crazy crooked blaze, and you're like, that's what
perfect.
makes it.
Yeah, it's perfect. Little off,
So I'm really interested to hear you talk about, also you were talking about, tens of hundreds or thousands of band stallions you've known. What year did you start your interest in wild horses and then start wild horse education, and how many years because as far as I remember
how much time do we have, Claire?
I know. we're gonna have to have you back
again. Well, I've always had horses all my life. My first horse, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was a retired officer. My father was a police officer. It was a big old Cleveland Bay. And then we had a bunch of other horses nobody could ride, things like that. So my interest in horses began probably at that right time, when the pheromones hit your developmental stage. Yeah, I got that, I got that hit. I was rescuing horses from a kill pen, and I was rehabbing draft horses. I love draft horses.
Yeah.
Often they don't even have names. They're literally farm equipment. They're tractors, they're trailers, and they're some of the sweetest, gentlest beings on this planet. And so I was rehabbing draft horses, and I saw a branded Mustang in the kill pen, and the kill buyer wouldn't sell them to me because he had to make weight. And so either I could have the 2,400-pound perch around I had come to get, or I could get the Mustang. And if I took both, he wouldn't make weight on his shipment. And I had to take the perchy because that's what I had come for. And I'll never forget his eyes. It was like, I owed him. And so that's when I'm I come from the world of journalism and stuff. And so I started writing stories and researching. I was also doing children's books back then. And I had done a book about a draft horse. It was Annabelle and the Pink Slippers. She had found her, in the little pink slippers that you make, right? And so I started researching a children's book on horses. And my grandfather was in the cavalry in World War I, and served with horses from Sheldon. So that was kind of the area and herd I was familiar with because I had heard Grandpa talk. And so that's what drew me into wild horses, was that area, and it kind of became my sanctuary. But it's like it's such it's so seedy. Sheldon had no protection under the 1971 Act, and we all know that story. And that was my first litigation. At the very first roundup I went to up in Calico, I watched a foal. Its feet were literally run off. It was run so hard it suffered hoof slough, and its hoofs began to fall off. And everybody lied about what had happened to that foal. I had tried to take it. They wouldn't even let me have it to get it medical care. And I was like, well, if this is how this system is run when it comes to an individual horse. So here's somebody willing to take on the foal, take on all the medical care, do what needs to be done to save this baby's life, and they're just going to lie to me about it. What's the rest of the program look like? I promised that little foal that we were going to get a humane handling policy, and that's,
And you did.
I got pretty angry at that point in time. You know, my marriage had fallen apart and it was really bad. I ended up homeless in a car. So it's like, okay, well, here, this is familiar to me. This is all abusive people. I know this game, you know, and I kind of just didn't miss a beat and traveled 112,000 miles in 1 year. Roundup to roundup to roundup, kind of like a Grateful Dead groupie, you know. And litigating and litigating and litigating. And we got the beginning of a policy. And we back then they wouldn't even let you into roundups. And we got an access policy and, you know, still working on those and trying to get a fair share of the resource on the range, which is the hardest step of all.
Yeah.
You know, because horses don't have a credit card or a bank account or a stock portfolio. And, you know, and so, yeah, so, you know, trying to get them a fair share of resource where that you've got some profit driven use that wants it that's the hardest part of all.
And it's so interesting to me that because you touched on it earlier about, you know, seeing that horse and him shipping and you feeling that loss. And there are so many stories. The way that I look at it, because I really tried to come into this, you know, oh, I'm not going to take a side. I'm going to give everyone a fair chance and keep an open mind and be friendly and ask questions to the BLM. And then I'll be friendly and try and ask questions of the advocates. And I truly think that wild horse advocates, or myself at least, they're not born, they're created out of the frustration and the witnessing the cruelty and the illogical decisions that are made horse by horse, because I have also been at the corrals, begged them to let me pick up a foal and literally put him in my truck and get him help, you know, and he's down and just be denied and then get an email, you know, the baby
He's
died,
dead.
sad emoji,
Dead.
sad emoji. And I'm like, fucking sad emoji, are you joking? Like,
oh, you're gonna have to bleep that out. You just made this you know, R-rated with your language, girlfriend.
I can bleep myself, but I don't really mind swearing on my own podcast. But
okay, you just gave me license. I'm trying to be so good.
but I feel like every one of those horses, from Buddy saying find my family, help my family, I've never to this day understood why I kept feeling that he kept saying that to me. And then all the horses that we've lost, you know, and losing another one this week in Commander, and he's probably shipped to slaughter. But it's like each one of them, the amount of actions I've taken in memory of or for that horse, or so his life didn't end in vain, you know, has really constantly propelled me, you know, forward.
Yes.
So it's so interesting that you say that it comes down to one horse. And so many times I felt the same. Well, if they really cared, what difference would it make to them for me to pick up that foal? You know, right. What difference would it make? If it dies in my truck, that's on me. You didn't make a bad decision.
And if you care, and this horse is one of hundreds or thousands, depending on the holding facility, right? Yeah. Where you don't have an on-staff veterinarian, you don't have the equipment to deal with it, you don't have one-on-one care or care overnight like you might need. Why wouldn't you give that one horse to someone to care for? And to me, that speaks so much about the entire program, from the lack of oversight in the adoption and sale program all the way to how AML is set. It's the same thing you find throughout the whole program. And so advocates are forged in fire.
Yeah. I love that.
You know what I mean? And the anger that comes out of trying to, because we come into it like reasonable people and you want to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
And then you're hit with this wall of a lack of information and lies so blatant that it's like, and how much are we going to pay you for the rest of your life on your retirement and your benefits and all that? How much for lying like this? And I know it's really hard for like the media or Congress to understand how deeply corrupt, and not just corrupt, but I mean, is there even a word in the English language to define this toilet soup, right? That the BLM actually is. And all anybody has to do is check.
Yeah.
They're claiming something as a fact. Are you even going to scratch the surface to see what they've tried to base that fact on? And the second you start to scratch, you find, like I did, I'm no longer a journalist. I'm a journalist advocate, and I'm going to use those reporting skills. And I'm going to keep scratching and take you to court. I'm hooked. You made me mad. You do that, I never go away,
God, me too. And I feel like I have very much tried as best I could to emulate that by taking horses that either shine a light on the abuse they suffered, once they were rounded up,
story to tell, Claire.
Yeah, or all the way back to their herd and why it was rounded up. And I got to tell people over the years what an incredible resource you have been. When I have picked up a horse and gone, oh, it's a triple B or antelope or diamond or little Oahe, all these places. And then you would tell the story of that herd and the horses in it and maybe have pictures of the roundup. And it has been, I've learned so much from you. And I think the biggest thing, the question, I often will tell a story and it's horrifying and people are so mad and then they're like, what can we do? And I would love you to answer that question. I mean, obviously go and follow Laura Leigh at Wild Horse Education. That's a good place to start because she does a lot of action items. And I've never considered myself an advocacy group as such, although I've done a lot of advocacy. I feel like I've raised awareness for a lot of things. But what are those things that a person watching this being outraged and angry, what can they do to bring change?
The first thing, right, is if you love something and want to advocate for it, you have to spend the time learning. So say you have a child who has a disease. You don't stand there and scream at the doctor that the disease doesn't exist. The first thing you do is you research everything you can, and then you have to be discerning. So not every doctors aren't saints, they're human beings, right? So you have to find even the right authority that aligns with what your research is showing. And so it's not just to follow whatever advocacy group has, large following. Or if there's a petition that says save wild horses, please read the petition before you add your signature. I've been at meetings where one petition will be for PZP and one will be against PZP, fertility control. And they both start with save wild horses. And the names on the petitions are exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of one of the things BLM takes advantage of, is that advocacy itself perpetuates a lack of information and a lack of disclosure of agenda. And so you really have to find, so if somebody's telling you we're doing X to save the wild horses, what are they do? Please take the time to learn what they're doing before you support it. And so for me, as an advocate who's been in this for so long, antelope at the roundup, most people are there's another Palomino stallion that I knew very well, Sunshine. He suffered a catastrophic fracture during the first day of an extended heat wave, and as he was escaping trap. A lot of your viewers probably saw the footage in one venue or another, and he was run for 30 minutes before being euthanized. And immediately when something like that happens, agenda tries to co-opt those events and take them elsewhere to things that would not have changed the circumstance of his death in any way, shape, or form, but they use that emotional response. The only thing that would have changed the circumstances of his death would be an enforceable welfare policy that takes into account things like, so heat index rise and heat and foaling season correlate to catastrophic death.
Yeah.
So 39 horses died during that roundup. The majority of the deaths, all of the catastrophic deaths, the broken necks, the broken legs, all of that occurred during heat index rises. And so what we need is we need an enforceable welfare policy that becomes a rule, meaning it's open to public input and all of that. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Because fertility control done in that area is done through catch, treat, and release. There's a helicopter roundup. Horses are removed. And then, so would increasing fertility control have stopped what happened to him? No. No, there would still have been a helicopter roundup, right? So when you see something, take a minute to try to figure out. And it's really hard because I know the public gets bombarded all the time. But try to step back and think before you react. And I think that's always a good, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's the upcoming elections, step back and think, but before responding to the pressure from social media to react one way or another, use some discernment.
Speaking of that, having been in this arena for so long, what would you say are the biggest changes in the landscape of wild horse politics, advocacy? I'm sure social media has, you sort of touched on that, has changed that landscape. Would you say things have gotten better over time, or was it easier back in the day when, you were sort of out
in the day?
I just wonder if you could talk to that point a little bit. We've only got about 7 minutes left, but I would love just to hear.
Well, social media has been around for a little while. I mean, we all saw what it's done, and the crux, the tipping point in social media, creating dissension and then capitalizing on that dissension to move really bad agenda.
Yeah.
All of that kind of came to a head around 2016, 2017. Same thing in wild horses. From about 2009 to about 2013, we had the beginning of incredible progress. So there hadn't been a humane policy for 40 years. We finally began to get the framework to work that. It never went the next step, which would have been review, revision, and becoming an enforceable rule. That was stopped dead in its tracks. So was access to information. We were getting BLM to publish things like facility reports and all kinds of things, and vet reports online. All of that went away. We were at the very beginning of actualizing herd management area planning, which would do things like create water source improvement to better distribute horses throughout the range, fix some of those boundary line issues, and begin to disclose how forage allocations are set and things like that. All of that went away in 2016. It all disappeared. And so we began to have incredible progress where at Antelope, I was having flashbacks. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm ready to check myself in, man, because I'm like, a war veteran having flashbacks. I feel like I'm back in 2010. So we've literally, the whole marketing, which is perpetuated through social media and through control of the media.
Yeah.
All of those big corporate entities, Path Forward was a freaking disaster.
Yeah.
It was literally giving away the range to livestock.
Yeah.
In exchange for increased fertility control that was undefined.
Yeah.
But getting to that AML first without fixing any issues. And that really was the crux of the deal.
Yeah.
And then there were people who moved that deal openly with their names on it. And then people who have moved that deal claiming to be in opposition to it. But when you read what they're asking you to do under their Save Wild Horses, Sunshine breaks his leg, and then more money for fertility control, right? Yeah. That's moving that path forward agenda. And so the public really has to be careful, because social media has really made it almost like whoever screams the loudest,
Yeah.
whoever can buy more likes, whoever can, whatever.
Yeah.
That's who's right.
Yeah.
And we're creating a world where that fiction of right is becoming our reality, and not just in wild horses, but in so many other places. And so, it's kind of like that. We have to kind of step back and recognize every little victory.
Yeah.
Buys a little bit of space to try to get a more adult conversation, and then buy a little more space for a little more adult conversation. And we really have to start elevating wild horses to the level of environmental issues. Wild horses are a public lands issue, right?
Yeah.
That's what this is. They're not cows. They're not a use. And even when you watch news story, a lot of news stories that come out, when you're talking about land use planning for wild horses, they don't want to write about that. They don't want to talk about that. They want it. Media itself is doing a disservice because they're keeping wild horses in this bubble outside of public lands.
Yeah.
So if we were talking about any other species that lives on public land, things like litigation, it's almost like they say, and wild horse education has filed litigation every year since, like it's a bad thing. Yeah. But if I was an environmental group, they would be, even the media would be applauding that effort, especially when you're so small. I mean, we're really tiny. Imagine it like this, we're putting this stuff together with duct tape and bubble gum, Claire.
I'm aware of that. And I wanted to, we've got 3 minutes left, but I know that something that I have called you more often about than any other thing is those days when I feel really in despair and I'm like, is there any point in doing this? I go to the corrals, and even if I take 4 horses, I'm leaving, 2,000 there, and it feels really hopeless. Is there hope? And that's something you have given me in my darkest times, but I would love you just in the last 2.5 minutes just to say, let us know if there is hope for wild horses.
Absolutely. And think about if you didn't.
Yeah.
That's the thing. If I didn't, if nobody did, what would then be the outcome? Yeah. So just like in the environmental world, is there hope to save whales?
Yeah.
Is there hope to save the ocean? Is there hope to save all of us no, we have to be part of that wave.
Yeah.
That's trying.
Yeah.
Right. And because we don't know what's around the next corner. I mean, the next corner could come that breakthrough.
Yeah.
Yep. Or we finally get an adult conversation.
I'm up for one, Laura Leigh. I love having a conversation with you anytime. Thank you so much.
Look in the eyes of your horses.
Yeah, that's what I do on those bad days. I do. I'm like, I can't see the world. But this one horse, that is his world. And so that's the way I have to look at it. But thank you I think I'm going to have you back later on because
I love you, Claire. Keep your blinders on, girl.
I will. Thank you. Put on by Laura Leigh. Love you.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.